morning, Carl.
Well, greetings, Michael. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good. Yeah,
I,
things are good.
Fantastic. I'm just continuing to appreciate the Kitces blue sofa that you continue to have in the background to honor the Kitces brand. It's fantastic.
I'm trying to figure out how we can. I was trying to cover it up. I literally had the exact same thought. I was like, oh my gosh, that's crazy how close that is to that blue. But there is a subtle difference. My wife has pointed out. She's an interior designer. She picked out the couch. She's like, that is not Kitces blue. She told me, so we're all good.
Okay. All right. I've just like slowly eked into her subconscious though that like it has to be close to Kitces blue.
All of her mood boards for clients lately have had this weird blue sneaking into it. I'll have to tell her why that is.
It's the strangest thing. It's the strangest
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
Well, I'm looking forward to today's discussion. One of the things that comes up so often in feedback we've gotten to the podcast and questions around advisors is like around growth. I think so many of us struggle with growth and not quite getting the growth that we want. Most common way that firms grow is through referrals. We continue to see that in our Kitces marketing research now as well. Whenever I get down to the individual advisor of like, how are you growing with referrals? Or like, what are you trying to do to grow more with referrals? I think the most common answer I hear is usually something to the effect of, well, I just try to be more awesomer for my clients so that they'll feel more inclined to refer me as one advisor had said to me recently, they're like kind of tearing a page out of the Seth Godin book. Like if you want to be referred, be remarkable, like do something that is worth remarking of. And they pour all their energy and effort into being super awesome advisors and giving great service and great advice to their clients. And then it's like crickets chirping sometimes. Like the magical referral fire hose does not just suddenly open up and start shooting clients at us. For which usually the alternative advice is, well, you have to ask for referrals. And if we started in the business, anybody who started out in like the sales side of the business, which is still a lot of us, if you've been doing this for any period of time, like asking for referrals. I mean, literally the way I was trained, you bring a piece of paper, you put it in front of the client, and you ask them to write down the names and phone numbers, because there weren't email addresses back then. Write down the names and phone numbers of 3 people you know that I could call. Or if that's not uncomfortable for you, I've also created this template letter, because it was a physical paper letter then, and like just put in the names of the clients and sign it on the bottom for me. And then I will go and say, like, this is literally how we were trained. Like, this is what we did. This is what all my colleagues did. And I thought it was so icky, I refused to do it. So of course, yet another reason why I didn't grow in that original sales job. So like, I feel like we're caught on these like bookends of pain. Either I'm doing all this work and pouring my heart and soul into my business, trying to give my clients great service, but they're not remarking on me. Or I'm supposed to ask them for referrals and it feels icky, or I've been trained in actual skeevy ways about how to do it. And I'm sorry, I'm just going to outright say that's kind of skeevy, what we were trained in used to do. So how do you handle the referral conversation?
Yeah,
How do you handle this?
So we've got a couple of problems here. The first one is, well, first we just got to cover that background. That's exactly the way I was trained too. It was horrible, and I had this exact same problem. So it was like, okay, I was thinking literally like a math problem. I was like, wait, and I've asked this just like you, hundreds if not thousands of times now. Like, how do you get what's your main source of business? Referrals. How do you get referrals? It's always like, I don't know. So I was like, wait, let's get this straight. Your main source of business is something you don't have a process for. So let's fix that. What's the options for process? I was taught the same way as you. The way I was taught was, they always involved a painful discussion, often taking using guilt, shame, and blame and placing it on the client's shoulders, signing them up for an obligation. I was taught, and I was at, I think the organization that probably had some of the best sales training back in the day. And I was taught to say, I remember I had this conversation with my biggest client. His name was Dave. I said, Dave, I did what I was taught. Dave, I did it once, by the way, you'll see why. I said, Dave, you pay me two ways.
Oh, I get paid two ways.
Yeah. One is the fees you pay, and the other is by sending your friends and colleagues to me. And Dave looks at me and goes, Carl, let's get one thing straight. I pay you, he's my biggest client. I pay you one way. And if you'd like me to pay somebody else that one way, I'm happy to, right? And obviously I never asked the question again. But that was always it. And this finds its form like in the seminar marketing thing where you would say, I've got a seat for you and your ticket is bringing someone else, right? It always
and
always the same thing.
And it's worth noting as well, to me, there really is an interesting dynamic in how the whole I get paid two ways thing has shifted, because, I mean, frankly, I remember getting trained on that conversation as well. But it was, I get paid two ways. When you end out using my company's products to help achieve your financial goals. We're representing a life insurance company then, and and referring me and introducing me to your friends and family. But the interesting difference to me, like, there was no fee, because that was all commission-based work, and nobody saw the commission or knew what I was compensated. And we were actually trained, like, we get paid two ways: what my company gets when you use their products, and compensating me by introducing me to your friends and family, and giving me referrals.
So bad.
And so there was this whole dynamic of, like, you haven't actually paid me anything. And of course, like, I was still getting commissions on the other end, but, like, you haven't actually paid me anything. I did all this planning work for you and you haven't written a check. So, like, this is the implied payment now. And frankly, I think that's why it worked a lot, at least for the people who are willing to do it and have that conversation. But I think, as your story with Dave highlights, like, that whole thing has really broken down as we've gone from a world of commission-based products to fees. Because as like Dave so astutely noted, like, no, I already paid you one way, and it's a really big check or a really big line item out of my investment account. I know exactly what it is because I can see it on the statement, and, like, it has a lot of zeros in it. You're doing fine with the first way of getting paid. I don't owe you squat on getting paid the second way.
Well, but the point is, it's just as icky of an experience, right?
Yes.
Like, and to a large degree, I'm shocked it ever worked. And if it did work, it brought out really bad feelings. Everybody felt bad. You felt bad. You had to take a shower after the conversation. The client was upset. The whole thing. So I was like, well, how do we solve this problem? Because we know that I want to have an impact in the world. This is what I was thinking. I want to have an impact in the world. I know the work I do changes people's lives. I know I'm making people's lives better. And if I want to do that for more people and I want to make more money, I'm totally fine with that. And I was like, and I know the best way to do that is for clients to refer people to me. I know that. We know that's best for me. We know it's best for the client, and we know it's best for the prospective client. Everybody benefits when that happens, assuming my work's as good as I think most of the people listening to their work is, right? So I was like, how would you solve this problem? And yet it's not happening. That was the problem. Like, here's the best way, and yet it's not happening. Or at least I was remarkable too. And I got those remarkable referrals, like these random things that happened. And that's great. Like, keep doing that, right? Great. But when I started thinking about this,
I think, as you pointed out, like, the problem with that is when your main source of growth is those kinds of referrals, and you don't have a process about how to make them happen and how to flow them through, you get into the trap that I see so many advisors, like, well, if I'm remarkable and I get, I give great service and I get some referrals, how I'm going to get more referrals? Slave away more, like, be more remarkable, give away more stuff that may be free or over the top or beyond scope service, because I'm just going to try to pour more of my heart and my soul into this client, hoping that they just notice it and remark upon it to their friends. And at best, it's not a very good process. And I think at worst, ironically, for a lot of us, like, well, the client's never had any other advisor and we're the first one we work with. Like, they don't even know it's remarkable. They just assume it's normal because it's the only thing they've seen. And it's not an effective process for scaling those outcomes.
No, for sure. And so at the very least, we may not, I don't think there's necessarily like we may not know what goes on in the middle, but we could know the input and we know the output. And if we can just increase the number of inputs. So what's that conversation look like? And one of the reasons this doesn't happen for us, even when we're remarkable, is people don't talk about money. Like, we kind of forget that. We talk about it all day long. You don't talk about money. Imagine what you need to do in order to be in a conversation where somebody would refer. So you have a happy client. Imagine what one of their friends has to do in order for the happy client to tell. They have to, A, talk about money, and B, probably admit they're unhappy or something, right? Like, they have to admit, like, my person's not doing a good job. They have to sort of be kind of having a conversation about how they might have made a mistake somewhere, right? Like, something's gone wrong.
Point. Like, they don't have to admit that their person's not doing a good job. They have to admit that they chose a person who's not doing a good job, which is actually awkward for us to have to admit and acknowledge.
Or that they don't have a person and they're scared and they don't know what they're doing, or like, all of those are things like, hey, it just doesn't happen. So how do we increase the frequency of this? Now, listen, I'm really hesitant to talk about this because I've worked on this for 15 years and I know a conversation that works. It doesn't hurt anybody. The worst case scenario is a good outcome. The worst case is a good outcome. And it's I'm not going to say it's easy, but it's very, very simple. And it's only hard because we get in our own way. The reason I'm hesitant to talk about it is no one will do it. Like, I've been teaching it for a decade and no one does it. The people who do it, without fail, 100%. In fact, we have this as a $5,000 workshop. And for a long time, we had an ROI guarantee on it. That if you did this 10 times and you didn't have direct revenue that you could actually point to, this came as a result of this conversation I had. If you didn't have direct revenue equivalent to the fee of the workshop, we would give you all of your money back. But you had to do the conversation 10 times. We've never issued a refund. Because either you don't do the conversation 10 times or it works. It's a binary outcome. You can't. So
I feel like we're a split here. So I want to hear what the conversation is. I can already tell, queuing up, like, our next episode of the podcast is going to be all the people who don't have the conversation and why they don't have the conversation. Because I think that we have a lot of referral reluctance on our end as well. So maybe we'll come back to that on the next or on a future episode of the podcast. But I like, you built this up so well now. Like, I got to know, like, what is the conversation?
I know. Okay, so let's talk about it. It's going to be
magic words.
It's going to be anticlimactic. It sounds so simple. This is the other reason people don't do it, is it sounds so simple. But I after teaching this for over a decade and having hundreds, if not thousands, of conversations about why we don't do it, the main reason is fear, and we'll save that, right? It's just fear, if we can get to admitting it. Scared. So here's the conversation, right? So you find it starts by making a list. Make a list of 10 clients that you'd like to replicate.
Okay.
This is place number one, where people find all sorts of excuses and reasons to hide. They say, I don't have 10. Fine. Make a list of as many clients as you have that you'd like to replicate. If you don't have any clients that you'd like to replicate, fine. Make a list of people who act like clients that you would want. Like, they might be your father-in-law, who would be a great client if it weren't for the fact that he was your father-in-law, or maybe your sister, or maybe a dentist that you know that's a good friend. So make a list of people who look like your ideal client. That's list number one. Then filter that list by people who like you. Only put people on the list that like you. This is we have had a couple advisors do this conversation and come back and go, it didn't go well. And say, why didn't it go well? Because it turns out my service has been really bad. I'm like, well, don't put them on the list. So put people on the list who like and value the work you're doing and who you'd like to replicate. Okay. This gets even more powerful with all the work you've done and the work we've done around, you say niche, I say niche. Now I've been trained. So around specialization, even more powerful if you could make it they're also in your target niche, right? But not a requirement. Don't hide behind that one, not a requirement. So you got a list. Okay, let's say there's 10 people on the list. That's the goal. We want to have this conversation 10 times. The reason we don't want to have it once is because it's going to be a little bit scary and you're going to get better and better at it. But I promise, even the scary ones, I've done so much work to make this easy. So we got a list. Step one. Step number two, make an invitation. So invite, here's what the invite looks like. Sally's on my list. I email or call Sally. You may want to email just so you know the words can be typed out just the way you want. You can say this specifically. Sally, we're making some changes in the way we go about, insert your word for marketing. Like, if I like just saying marketing, but you could say business development or new business development or client acquisition, whatever your word is. But we're considering some changes in how we go about business development at Prasada Capital, name of firm. And I would love to get your advice. Could we meet for 15 minutes and I could just ask you some questions? So I could run some questions past you. So I could ask you some questions. So I could ask some questions. Okay, this is place number 2 where everybody hides, or number 3 or 4 we're at now where everybody hides. Like, we can't meet. Fine. Like, get on the phone. Like, have a phone call. Have a Zoom chat. We had
presumably, if this is a valued client, like, they're going to take the call. Like, they like you. It's okay. They already like you. They're going to take.
Don't put anybody on this list. Here's the trick. This is a radical idea. This is the trick. Don't put anybody on the list who would say no to that invitation. And here's what you can do. We just had somebody, this was somebody else's idea. I can't remember who it was. They said they've been having a lot of success with Zoom coffee or Zoom tea, right? They have coffee delivered 5 minutes before to the client's door. And it is coffee and a croissant or whatever, right? So look, the reason why 15 minutes, or if you can do it in person, the reason I don't even drink coffee, but the reason why coffee is the sort of ask I make, very specifically calculated. Here's why. It's to lower the pressure on you, because you're scared to do this. I know you are, because I am too. Like, and coffee, how long's the right time for a coffee meeting?
Like, if it's really going backwardly and awkwardly, just down the rest of the cup of coffee and get out of the meeting. You don't have to wait for the next course of the meal to arrive.
Exactly. That's the point. Is it okay if it goes 12 minutes? Of course. Is it okay if coffee goes an hour? Of course. That's the point. It's not that you don't have to wait for, if you run out of something to say and the food hasn't even gotten there yet. So in our current environment, you can say, hey, could we just jump on Zoom together for 15 minutes? Could we have a quick phone call? Okay, I'd like to get your advice. So let's go back through this. Sally, we're considering some changes to how we go about business development here at Prasada Partners, Prasada Capital, name of firm, right? And I would love to get your advice. I did not say I'd love to pick your brain. Please, we're trying to outlaw that, because every time I hear it, I don't have any cushion. So every time I hear it, it hurts. Like, I'm like, don't say, that doesn't sound fun. So I'd like to get your advice. The other one you can use is I could use your help. Okay, now I should have told you, you've got to have a mindset shift here, because every word I'm using could go really quickly down the slick, icky path. But you got to have a mindset that here's the mindset. We're going from sales to research. This is not a tricky sales technique. You are trying to solve a problem. Remember, I ran into this problem and I was like, how would you solve this problem? Well, if I was a researcher, I would go do research. Who would I do research with? The people who know the problem.
Right.
My clients. Okay, what if I just go ask them? I'm just going to go ask them. So you're just asking. And then the other mindset shift we're making is we're shifting from outcome focus to process focused.
Okay.
You win by simply having the conversation. You get to check a box. That's it. It doesn't matter what happens. And I promise you, the worst case scenario will be fine. Right? So we haven't set up a situation where it could be bad. Right. Okay. So you got to have that firmly. You got to be thinking academic, not sales. So that's when you say, I could use your help. If you say I could use your help as a salesperson, you're like, this is a little tricky ploy you're using. If you say it as a researcher, you mean it. And I hope I don't have to remind this group, like, we only say things we mean. So I meant it. Like, I could use your help. Okay, great. We're considering some changes. I'd love to get your advice. Could we meet for 15 minutes? I could ask you some questions. Great. So that's step number 2, invitation. Step number 3 is the conversation. Okay. Do you see any places we need to talk about hiding yet? Or we're saving that for the next?
No, we'll talk about hiding in the future. Like let's just get through the actual conversation.
Okay, cool. So now we're showing up. We have a conversation. We sit down with Sally. We say, Sally, thanks so much for spending some time. As I mentioned, we're considering some changes to how we go about business development at Persona Capital, and I could really use your help, or I'd really love to get your thoughts on something. And here's the question. This is gonna be the scary part. Okay. Now, again, we're a researcher. We only say things that are true. We're only focused on the process. So don't say this if it's not true. Don't put Sally on the list if this isn't true. Sally, I've really enjoyed working with you. Okay, now insert niche if you could here. I really enjoy working with dentists or entrepreneurs with a successful exit over 10 million like you, right? But I've really enjoyed working with you. Here's the question. And I would love more clients just like you. Here's the key. If you were me, how would you go about that? And then quiet.
If you were me, how would you go about that? Okay.
If you were me, how would you go about that? Now, please put those of you who are like, oh, I can see this. No, put your researcher hat back on. Like if you're truly a researcher, you don't even care about the outcome. You just are actually curious about what they're going to say.
Right.
The goal is not to get a name. In fact, if we have time, I'll tell you that's actually not the best outcome. I'll tell you what the best outcome is in a minute, but so that's not our goal. So that's the question. So let's go through client responses real quick. I want to take you through 3 fast. One is blank stare. Okay, this is a good question. People probably aren't used to being asked this question. So don't be surprised if they don't know the answer. That's by definition probably, one of the signs you're asking a good question is somebody be like, wow, I've never been asked that before, or that's a really good question, or I haven't thought about that. So blank stare is okay. I used to think blank stare was bad. Just if you can, just lean into the blank stare a little bit. If you can't, here's where you get permission, because we can't have a bad outcome. So if you're starting to feel a little anxious, you've got ripcord permission right here. And here's the ripcord. If Sally says, I hadn't really thought about it, I don't know. And for some reason you're uncomfortable with the uncomfortableness, which I'm not anymore. I like the uncomfortableness because it's a sign it's a good question. But if you are at first, Sally goes, I don't know. You can go, oh, that's totally fine. I realize it's a question you weren't expecting. Hey, if anything comes to mind, just let me know. How are the kids? That's the ripcord.
Okay.
Okay, what happens at the end of a ripcord discussion? 3 things. Number 1, I'm telling you, if you do this right and you're nice and you're honest, people feel honored that they were asked. Like think about when you get asked for advice or help from someone you like, who's coming in as an academic, not as a salesperson. You feel honored you were asked. That's number 1. Number 2, shocking. If you do this 10 times, at least one person will say to you, I didn't know you were accepting new clients. Every time, 1 out of every 10. So number 2, the person knows you're accepting new clients. Number 3, they might think about it. I promise you they wouldn't think about it. It's still going to be
noodling in their brain, right? Just take any time someone asked you for advice and you didn't know the answer, like you're probably still going to be thinking about it after the meeting. You're going to be running the script in your head of what else you could have answered and said. So I'm presuming that means every now and then when you do this, you get like an email from Sally 3 days later.
Some of the best.
Like, I thought of something.
Some of the best. Months later. Hey, I was thinking about that conversation we had a couple months ago. So especially if you're in the mindset that I think most of the listeners here will be in, because you're good, like we're not, icky salespeople. So they feel honored, they know you're accepting new clients, and they'll think about it. And I promise you, none of those 3 things will happen if you don't have this conversation. So we're just trying to increase the odds. So be remarkable, do that. Show up on time, do what you say you're going to do, say please and thank you. Do all those things. Dan Sullivan's laws of referability, right? Do all those things. But then now let's increase the odds by having this conversation. Pull the ripcord if you need to. Here's the second way to handle blank stare. treat blank stare as research, an opportunity for research. What I mean by that is run an idea past them. So they have a blank stare and they go, I don't know. Grab one of the ideas that you've either from other conversations or that I'll give you one right now. Well, actually, I'll give you one in a minute that you could use. Like you could say, hey, someone else suggested this. What do you think of that idea? And it's a good idea. Like would you have, and again, don't slip into, if I did this, would you bring people?
Yeah.
You could, but you can say, if I had done that, would that have been something that you would have attended? You know, if it was an event or something. So blank stare equals ripcord or research. Okay. Number 2 is an idea. And this is, I think, the best outcome. Number 3 is they give you a name. But I actually like ideas better. So let me just give you an idea. Like here's Christine's. Christine, I was having this conversation with Christine. She's a technology salesperson. She was an amazing client. This is back in the late 1999. She was an amazing client. It was about to get a little trickier for her in 2001. She was at EMC, right? So, so she says, she's like, oh, that's an interesting question. And I'd gotten to this point where I could not pull the ripcord. So I was like, yeah, just listening. And then she said, you know what? Actually, I got into technology sales because I wanted to control my own schedule. And the main reason I wanted to control my own schedule was so I could golf. But I never do because I'm just so driven, right? Like I don't take the time. So, you know, this would be crazy, but if you set up a tea time on Friday afternoon at 1:30 or 2 for a foursome each week during the summer, I'll bring the 2 other people you should meet. I mean, come on. Now, I don't golf, so I told her, but I knew Christine skied. I was about to learn to golf because of this, but I knew Christine skied. I said, Christine, that's amazing. That would be really great. I said, do you think it would work just as well with skiing? Like a half day up at Snowbird or Alta, which is 20 minutes from our office. And she was like, yeah, totally. Christine the first day, she brought Scotty and Steve skiing. I still remember the day. Beautiful Utah. Like, anyway, we won't go into detail, but Scotty and Steve were like, thanks, this was so amazing. Scotty and Steve both became clients. I had this diagram in my office, Christine, Scotty, and Steve, and then I had the genealogy chart for like my business that came from Scotty and Steve referring people. And because Scotty and Steve met me how? We went skiing.
Right.
They were like, hey, Carl, you want to do that again next Friday? I'll bring 2 people.
Yeah, they've learned like, get awesome skiing, price of admission, bring 2 people, you know, who Carl might like. You don't even have to say anything. It's just, it's accepted culture. You don't have to ask. It's just kind of out there now. You know how you got in the club, so you know how you bring other people in the club. We don't talk about
if you want to, that's exactly what I said to Scotty. I'm like, Scotty, yeah, if you want to go skiing, you just have to bring 2 people. And I didn't say that.
First rule of Carl's Ski Club. Got it.
I did not say that. That's the idea. Another idea, Jerry, I asked Jerry, same thing, a little uncomfortable because it's a good question. He's like, you know what? My dad used to attend these business breakfast meetings. It was like 6 to 8 people. And the person who organized it would always present something. And the goal was just to help, you know, understand a current issue. If you did one of those meetings, like a breakfast meeting, like we met at like a breakfast place with a private room, I'm pretty sure I could bring 6 people. And that started, we did that for like 18 months in a row. We did a monthly breakfast meeting based on Jerry's idea. Monthly breakfast meeting, and Christine helped build my business. It was amazing. So those ideas are amazing. Like another one was a client appreciation event, and somebody's like, but could you do something for families? So we had a concert pianist come, and all the families brought their kids that they wanted them to learn how to play the piano. And the concert pianist would play. This is John Schmidt of the Piano Guys. People now may even know the Piano Guys. John would play, and then in between songs, he would talk about his creative process.
Oh, very cool.
And so the moms and dads were all just like seeing their kids listen to this. It was amazing. We got comments. So that was an idea from, if you were me, how would you go about this?
So the essence of this is, you know, when you ask someone, if you were me, how would you grow? Like, how would you try to grow the business and meet more people like you? People don't actually answer what they think you, Carl, should do. They literally answer, what they would like to do personally, which means when you then say, well, what if I did that? They're like, well, I guess
Yeah.
I would be a part of it since I just said that's what I would like
Yeah.
to do, right? Like Carl, Christine wasn't suggesting it because she thinks you like to golf. Christine
Yeah.
suggested it because Christine likes to golf. So
Yeah.
if you
Yeah.
organize a
Yeah.
golf outing, guess who's going to show up with some friends?
Yeah.
Christine, who just said, I would do golf outings where I can bring my friends.
They are invested in the success of that idea. And you don't have to put any pressure on them. Like you just, in fact, I would avoid pressure as much as possible. Just be like, hey, no, like just avoid pressure. So ideas. Now realize we didn't ask them, how would you grow the business? Right? We just said, if you were me, I'd love to have more clients like you. If you were me, how would you go about that?
Okay.
Different words, different pressure, different feeling, different sense, different, no obligation. Just how would you go about that? I'm just trying to solve this problem.
And so then the third option is, or they just say like, oh, well, you should talk to my friend Jim.
Yeah, one quick thing. Sometimes in number 2, they give you bad ideas.
Yeah.
Like, hey, have you ever taken out a billboard? I had somebody say that. What about an ad in the Yellow Pages or the newspaper? And I always use those, again, research. Like, what would a researcher ask? Oh, hey, thank you. They'd write that down, and then they'd probably say something like, hey, would you have responded to that? Like if you saw it on a billboard?
Just curious, like what would a billboard have to say that would actually, like, that would make you want to work with someone?
Yeah, so you can ask in a very nice way, like, oh, I love that idea. Like, hey, let's just brainstorm real quickly. Like if I did that, would do that? People like, no, yeah, you're probably right. You know what? I'll think about it. Cool. How are the kids? You know, like that's, so then number 3 is name. Gosh, funny you should ask. And I'm telling you, we just did this with 2,000 advisors in the UK. I'm in London right now, and we just did this with 2,000 advisors in the UK. And I've got stories coming out of the, I mean, there's massive amounts of stories. And one was this great one, just like this, where somebody was literally like, crazy you should ask. I just left a meeting with I can't remember who it was. It was a relative of some sort, my sister, my brother, somebody. And, you know, the in-laws just inherited a whole bunch of money, and they were literally just asking me, and I just didn't think about it. Let me, and so again, is that going to happen every time? No, of course not. But we're just trying, I guarantee you it won't happen if you don't have the conversation. We're just putting yourself at risk. And if you have the
conversation enough times, I can pretty much guarantee that some version of that's going to happen with someone, just because if you have the conversation enough times, someone has something going on in their life who recently talked to someone in a recent moment that actually lines up with what you do. Like just
complaining about their person, sold a business, and like know somebody like, so I always, we haven't kept specific stats on this, but we think like, I have always said like 5 of them are just like, oh, it was a fun meeting. I had a good chat with a client. They know those 3 things. They're like option number 1, like, and then there's always one that's like, I can't believe I didn't even know you were accepting new clients. There's always that. And then it seems like 1 or 2 out of 10, you get a good idea. And 1 or 2 out of 10, you get an actual referral. Now the actual referral, hey, you should contact them. Remember, that's not what we want. We don't want a name to contact. We all know how that goes. Right. So the easy answer to that is, John or Sally, thanks so much for referring Dave to me. That is, I mean, honestly, it's not really what I was even expecting, and because I realize how hard that is. But you know, if I call Dave, I don't know that that'll be the most comfortable thing for me, just to email cold Dave. Hey, I have an idea. That's almost exactly how I'd do it. I'd wait. Hey, I have an idea. What if the 3 of us got together for coffee sometime? Right. You know, what if the 3 of us went on a hike? What if the 3 of us went on a walk? What if the 3 of us went skiing? What if the 3 of us jumped on Zoom? You know, like, so you're always, and again, that's research. You can say, Sally, if Dave had given me your number and I just emailed you out of the blue, do you think that'd be what would be the most comfortable way for me to talk to Dave? Right. So that's the referral conversation. I can guarantee, because I can use that kind of language, I can guarantee if you do this 10 times and you do it exactly the way I taught you, you will have no bad outcome. Remember, I told you to only ask people that would say yes and only ask people that are happy with your service. That's the one caveat, right? You have no bad outcome. And I can guarantee you, you'll have a good outcome. You will be happy you did it. I can't think of a better business building strategy. If I was building a business again, I would focus on doing 10 of these a month, right? Like I would just do this over and over and over and over and over until you find the Christine idea, right? The monthly breakfast that you love, and then you implement that stuff.
And then you do it. But the essence of it is like, just, if you want clients to be more engaged with growing your business, right? We'll go one step up from getting referrals from them. Just if you want clients to be engaged with helping you grow your business, try just asking them.
Yeah, it's a crazy idea. It's a
crazy idea. Well,
we used to have people say, how did you know this? And I would say, crazy, we asked you.
Well, I love it. Thank you, Carl. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks, Michael.
For the conversation today on driving more referrals beyond just being remarkable and hoping they arrive.
Amen.